the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. Thank you for joining us. Today is April 14th, 2017. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here on the West Coast. We really appreciate your listenership and for you to share our station with people. Remind them they have to go online to listen to us, or they can listen to our podcasts on our website or on YouTube, all by the same name, UCY.TV. Thank you for joining us again. We have back with us a friend of our show from St. Louis, Wendy Lumetta, and I'm going to get right into it before we get into it. Wendy, I really appreciate you being here. I can't tell you how much you have made a great addition to this show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for all your kind words, Lonnie. I always enjoy our talks. I just appreciate the attention that you have and the bright light that you shine on the issues that we have here in St. Louis. And you're just a wonderful blessing to me. So I thank you again. I really enjoy our talks.
Great. Well, look, our listeners really enjoy knowing. I mean, it's not that we enjoy it. It's just these are vital. This is a vital part. As we're discovering, there's an epidemic of neglect. And I personally, in fact, I'm taking an introduction to environmental politics in college. And I have to say, one of my pet peeves about the course, while I'm learning a lot, is that we're talking about the environment. What we're really talking about is degradation to our lives. This is human. This is degradation to our civilization. It's not the environment. It's us. It's us.
That's very true. Our environment is our very lifeblood. And, when, policies like environmental protection gets rolled back, people may not always realize that it might not have an impact on their life today, and it might not have an impact on their life tomorrow, but it will increase their risk of being a cancer patient later in life. Yeah. Pollution is really something to be concerned about, something to be educated about, and something that people need to learn how to protect themselves against.
And one of the things you've done is you've learned how to speak the language of government. Like you have actually learned the acronyms, you've learned how it's worked. This is why you're a good advocate in St. Louis, is you understand how unfortunately, too many people in St. Louis have really had to get down to how the nitty gritty works and why. It gives us the answers to why you guys have not been helped.
Well, there's certainly that and the fact that if our government is supposed to have a standard of trying to be fiscally conservative and non-duplication of practices, then I don't understand why there are two different government factions that are remediating the St. Louis area, or in the case of Westlake landfill, not remediating it. So it's a little confusing to me, but there is so much information, and there are a lot of acronyms, a lot of scientific lingo, and it's really a lot to wrap your head around. And as much as I appreciate the compliment, I am a kindergartner in the language compared to a lot of the other people that have been working on it a lot longer than me, and understand the issue in much deeper detail than I do. But just the fact that we have two different government entities that are both in charge of nuclear waste is something that really shouldn't be happening in a realistic way, because one entity has been remediating it, taking care of it, packing it up, and shipping it off safely to a place where it's not in contact with water or people. And then the other one has basically been sitting on it for 27 years. And it's really unfair to the people that this has impacted. It's very serious, and I want more than anything for their lives and their livelihoods to become whole again. And that's really difficult when you have to be concerned with leaving your house and particles in the air and the air that you're breathing and the quality of the air. So there's a lot to know, and I'm fortunate that I have the time in my life where I'm able to spend time to devote to educating myself and going to meetings and understanding the bigger issues so that I can try to make an impact where I can. So
that does matter. I know, like for myself, I don't get to go to hardly any meetings because my life is busy supporting myself and going to school. Right. So a lot of that, like the NRC meetings yesterday, my guest, Heidi Lambert, suggested, she's a Northwest activist here. Her dad grew up in Hanford, and she's like, it's really important for people to show up at the meetings. Like, they do give public meetings. DOE does give public meetings about what's going on. And the pressure, seeing people's faces, pressures them to find their conscience. Like, they can, if nobody shows up, it's easy for them to just slag off and do nothing. But if a lot of people show up, then they start going, we better actually do something here. That's why I think it's very, very, very important for me to, I'm so grateful for this opportunity to our producer, that I have this opportunity to give voice to the activists across our country who really have no voice. I mean, especially in the nuclear industry, other than Libby Halebi, I don't know anybody who's dedicated to just exposing what has happened. It's a very shocking state of affairs. So getting back to that, let me ask you this. Is there an update on what's going on in St. Louis? I mean, I think most of our listeners are familiar with the situation of the burning fuel dump site, but is there an update to what's moving on and what's progressing, the state and the feds and all that stuff?
Well, as far as I know, the actions regarding Coldwater Creek are continuing, and that they're continuing to test and remediate areas of fluorescent in North St. Louis County. And then the issue regarding the Westlake landfill, I don't follow that information as closely because I'm not an immediate resident.
Right, you're not okay.
I certainly care about it and attend meetings and whatnot. I certainly feel for these people, and they absolutely don't deserve what's happened to them. But my understanding is that this week, the Missouri State Senate has approved a bill for a buyout for people within a certain distance from the landfill.
I read it was 3. I read that the legislation said 3 miles.
Okay. Well, I think that language might have changed over the course of the bill. I'm not really clear on the details. All I know is that it did pass the Senate, and so that means that it's going to go to the House next. Well, my understanding is that the last time we went through this, which was when Westlake landfill was being considered to be turned over to FUSRAF, the formerly utilized Science Remedial Action Program under the Army Corps of Engineers, there was a bill, I'm going to say a couple of years ago, that we were pushing really hard on, and we really wanted the site to be turned over to FUSRAF so that they could start to characterize and remediate the site. And that also passed the Senate, which was great news, but then it kind of stalled out in the Missouri House. And I could be wrong about this, but I believe that the House is where the financial decisions are made. So, the people that
That's
are
right.
the senators will say, sure, we can see the obvious wrongness of this and the blatant law violations that have occurred. But then when it comes down to the House, now we're talking about people that are science deniers. I remember that Jim Emhoff was the senator from Oklahoma, or the House member from Oklahoma, that now that was also a federal issue, the SUSRAP bill. But at any rate, we're talking about a guy from Oklahoma who heads the environmental committee who is, like a creationist climate denier. And these people really don't have any place in government science work. But when you're talking about a time where even the president of the United States does not believe in climate change, I'm mystified as to how he can get on his Twitter page and use his advanced technology from the comfort of his own gold toilet, and yet he refuses to accept this real information from scientists about climate change. What good is it going to do him to just say, well, no, it doesn't exist, or no, it's not man-made? Yes, it is. NASA has already proved this. So I think
you know what, Wendy, though, what my response to that is the same exact thing about the nuclear harm deniers. There are people who in fact, this is why St. Louis, I think I'm one of the very few people, I'm on the West Coast, I am completely still outraged. I mean, and the one thing I've discovered is it's not, this is why I think they're, quote, climate deniers, because if they do, then they have to accept responsibility. Same reason they do not handle the nuclear. I personally believe that the nuclear issue still continues to have a huge hand in part of what we call climate change now. I think climate change is an acronym for nuclear pollution. If you put, again, a map over if you put a timeline when the planet started dropping off the cliff on its climate, it literally coincided with the dropping of the bombs. It wasn't the cars. So, I mean, maybe they're right. I mean, I think the carbon emissions are changing the planet, but I also think that nuclear is destroying the microscopic life on this planet that is increasing the harm that the carbon does. So it's all mezclado. It's all mixed up. It all goes together, and but we have an entire population who glazes over or denies it and says, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand the science. And there's been a lot of people that I respect who say, I don't know if I believe in the climate change thing. And I think the argument is a moot point. What we have to look at is the negative effects of what we're living with. We have people, cancer is the number one killer in this country. I mean, we have genetic mutations that are off the charts. I mean, literally, it is if we were to look at the genetic mutations, our medical system and the way we have done medicine in the modern world sort of normalizes genetic mutations. Oh, they had a heart attack. This child was born with a hole in its heart. Okay, let's slice the 2-day-old infant up and operate on it, sew it back up. It has a trauma the first 48 hours of its life, but it lives and goes on to live and can't understand why it's scared of things in the world. It's had its heart sliced open at 2 days old. Get what I'm saying? I don't know.
There are real medical concerns, and the fact is, people are slipping away from science, and it's interesting. They're getting all the way into technology. They certainly want to be able to watch their TV in their hand anytime they want, and do all kinds of things related to that. But they have vehicles that can do everything, and they can plug their iPhone or their iPod in, and
they can bring a television into their vehicles.
Absolutely.
That's the most hysterical thing.
It's an area where people are embracing science when it helps them, and then if they find out something scientific that hurts them, well, all they have to do is just say, no, that doesn't happen, and somehow that becomes okay. This is not okay with me. I think that the reason with anyone.
Wendy, I really believe the fact that all of this challenges the premise of capitalism. In
Mhm.
capitalism, profit is the primary directive, not humanitarianism, not saving the
Right.
planet, not getting the most energy that we can while maintaining our ecosphere.
Mhm.
Capitalism says it doesn't matter who gets in our way if we have enough money. In fact, I had a boss once who argued with me about, oh my gosh, well, I haven't been employed by somebody in 20 years, so it must be 25, 30 years when the Ayn Randian thing started getting around. I had read all of Ayn Rand's books when I was much younger. And
Mhm.
so when it started, when Newt Gingrich started talking about Ayn Rand and how we have to have model our society off of it, I argued with my boss. And he said, look, we have a right as a species. If we kill every live animal on the planet, we can grow them in tanks and eat them. We'll have plenty of meat. And I'm like, it's not about eating, it's about honoring, right?
There's
It's
that, but I guess the guy obviously doesn't understand how pollination works. But at any rate,
They don't. That is,
yeah.
you were right. I think that's it.
Uh-huh.
Not only are they climate deniers, but
Mhm.
they're science deniers in their own little sphere of the world. They have no concept of how real science functions. That's a big, like the nuclear thing. I had a young man. I was a guest on a radio show the other day. A young man called in and said, "Well, don't you think that it might help us to make us a better, stronger species?" But that denies every bit of science that we've ever seen about nuclear testing.
There is just not enough public evidence. I know that you have referred to John Goffman's book several times during our conversations, and he is one of the very few published authors regarding the harms of nuclear science because not enough peer-reviewed scientific data exists of the exposure to nuclear pollution and what it can do in different levels over time. One of the most compelling examples that I can think of is the Fukushima disaster, because if you read about the history of it according to the actual historians that are recording this and the stories that have been written about it, they maintain that there were however many deaths there were that were the initial strong impact of radiation that killed people from acute radiation poisoning, and then they've maintained that not a single death has occurred since then.
I
Now,
know.
that isn't even possible from a scientific standpoint because some lower dose radiation was absorbed, and that caused a genetic mutation in a cell that caused cancer to someone as a direct result of that nuclear pollution exposure. However, because we cannot define that is definitively what caused the cancer, then they're able to continue to say, well, we can't really prove it. So people are left with the thought of, well, I guess nuclear pollution really isn't that bad since they haven't had any other deaths. It's like, no, they just can't prove it. They have had deaths. They just aren't characterizing it that way.
Well,
They're just
they have not allowed it to be proven. The reality is the IAEA and the U.S. military, I mean, they really run the show, basically. They control the science. This is an example in John Goffman's book. He was talking about, this was in, I think, 71, he was saying. Dr. Arthur Tamplin had done definitive work on the harm it causes to children and babies in utero, and he was about to testify at a symposium at a university. They basically told him he could talk about everything else, but he couldn't talk about the harm to children. If he did talk about it, they would not back his studies. They would not pay for his way. He would have no longer any funding. So he chose as a scientist to opt out of discussing the harm because he knew if he didn't have the money to fund his own research. And he didn't have the money to pay for himself to go to all these conferences. He would have had to pay out of pocket. So, again, they force it into coming down to money when it's not about money. And you guys are living. Let me ask you this. Let me get back to you guys in St. Louis and be more specific. I actually thought that at Coldwater Creek, they had moved out the 200,000 tons of waste from there. And I was told it took 18 years and it had been successfully moved out. And you said they're still testing. Is there still remediation? I mean, I thought that most of the major remediation had already been conducted.
Well, in all likelihood it has, but the reality is yes, they are still testing. So I guess really the answer to that would be we don't know if the majority of it has been found because they haven't tested it all yet. But
Wow.
it is believed that it is because the areas of remediation where they started from right on top of where the piles existed, where the corroded barrels leaked into the creek, they started there. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure if you would have a map of the area, but certainly people in the area would know there were several ball fields right there. And if I'm not mistaken, they had to remediate those ball fields 3 different times because
Wow.
they, kept going deeper and finding it and deeper and finding it and deeper and finding it. So at any rate, the Army Corps of Engineers kind of follows a scientific progression. They go from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration, and they work sort of methodically that way. So the last time that I actually spoke with the health physicist from the Army Corps of Engineers, he, and this was when after they had found it in the neighborhoods and in the parks and in people's backyards in North County, he stated that actually as they are proceeding away from the headwaters, that they are going into areas of lower concentration. So to me, that's good news. It kind of means that, maybe the water has sort of washed a lot of it out. In 1993 here, we had a 100-year flood where, all the whole entire area, major highways backed up, just it was a real mess. And at that time, I really believe that there were a lot of people that were illegally dumping things into the river. And there was a lot of pollution at that time because there wasn't a lot of oversight at that time. And people, were kind of granted more autonomy in what they were able to do. I'm not even sure if the laws existed at that time regarding dumping, and especially chemicals. But at any rate, that flood also helped to dilute the areas of radioactivity within the Coldwater Creek beds, which is actually where the people's yards are, and where, sometimes these creeks would back up into people's homes and they would get water in their basements. So there is potentially radioactive, basements around here that need to be tested, need to be, remediated, and we need to get to the bottom of it. So unfortunately, it is a government action, so we're limited by a budget, and they can only do so much, per year. I think the budget gets approved annually. So it's, it's a process. I think this year has been 20 years. I believe they started in 97, and then I think this year marks 20 years that the Army Corps of Engineers has been remediating in St. Louis. And also the amount of remedial stuff that they get rid of, I think that the number that you're thinking of might represent the entire St. Louis area and not just the North County site, because we're also talking about the downtown site, which is where Mallinckrodt was based. Right. And they had many, contaminated buildings that had to be raised and had to, they, and I'm pretty sure the Army Corps of Engineers is still down there. I know that they are. And they're still, after 20 years, they're still remediating the spot where they purified the uranium. 20 years later, they're still doing it. So
plutonium lasts 24,500 years. They don't test for plutonium, by the way. That's not something that they generally
uranium.
test.
Well, we didn't have plutonium here. That was in Hanford and Oak Ridge, I believe. But we processed uranium here.
So there was no plutonium on your site. See, this is where I really lack in terms of, this is why I like to have you guys on, because my concept of the science is, this is why I can talk about it repeatedly month after month so that it can absorb into my system. And I'm sure I'm like most Americans, you know what I mean? I don't mind being candid with my ignorance, because the only way we're going to really find out how to protect ourselves is be honest enough that we don't have the answers. We don't even understand the problem. That's kind of the issue. I think that
there is no ignorant question, because any question that you can ask and receive an answer to is definitely to your benefit. So, no, I embrace all questions. There are no dumb questions. You don't know something until you learn it or someone tells you about it. So how are you supposed to arbitrarily know information that you're not exposed to. So no, I appreciate any questions and enjoy questions, and I like talking about it with people. It's actually a fascinating subject, and even though it has directly resulted in people being harmed and even myself and family members, I still remain fascinated by the entire issue. It's really interesting to me that I really think that one reason that people do not take radioactive pollution as seriously as they should is because it is unknown to your senses. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't, hear it, taste it, feel it. It's completely, if you didn't know about it, then you would be completely oblivious to its presence.
Yeah, it doesn't make you feel sick. You don't even realize it. You think this is in fact how we're all being radiated, frankly. Like we have nitrates in our water, high levels, over 6 million people in this country, and probably much higher. I mean, the people in New York, what do they have? It's still ongoing. I think it was 66,000 times over the allowable level of tritium in their water. That's real.
Wow.
That's been going on. They discovered that in Indian Point in 2014. There are 6 missing bolts in that nuclear plant, and they cannot fix them because they can't get into them because it's leaking too badly. So at Indian Point, it is not a matter of if, it is really a matter of when. And what they're counting on is that it's going to be like those 2 plants in Illinois that are leaking. They've been leaking like sieves, but they haven't actually catastrophically fallen apart. Right. So this is their count. They're counting on the, cross your fingers and we're going to make it work. They're counting on that, quote, American ingenuity, really. And it's a bit arrogant.
Well, that's completely what it is arrogance. And has history not taught all of us that if there is one thing that is sure to happen, it is that engineered solutions fail? It just is a fact of life. They are going to fail. That's one real beef that I have out here in St. Charles County, which is where I live, because we have the first tomb of radioactivity, of radioactive waste out here in St. Charles County. It's the highest point of elevation, so it's like the mountain of the county where I live, and it's a giant engineered tomb for the chemicals and radioactive materials, and it's in this tomb that is supposed to last for 1,000 years. Well, these radioactive substances have half-lives of millions of years and billions of years. So really, what is the 1,000-year tomb going to really do? And besides that, how do you know it's going to last even 1,000 years? Because things break down all the time. I'm so saddened by the whole Dakota Access Pipeline issue because there have been so many spills. There have been so many things that have happened that it's just sad that the people that we've elected don't want to accept the lessons that history has.
Well, not only don't want to accept it, with his appointment of Rick Perry, it's kind of a nod to polluters to go right ahead. It really is. It is this is why the EPA budget his overall budget is going to cut the EPA by 60%, 40% immediately. So now it hasn't passed. It's still proposed. I'm hoping that our elected officials, and we can put pressure on Republicans to just not do that. It's completely insane what they're planning on. Climate deniers or not, we actually need to be funding remediation services. We need to pivot our government, kind of like how we did the jobs programs in World War II. Our jobs programs in America to help make our country, quote, great again, is going to be, let's clean the mess up. I mean, we have been taking off dirty diapers and dumping them everywhere. Let's just put it to you that way.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's being run by a bunch of babies who just want to have their candy all day long, and they don't want to grow up and be big, strong men. They don't mind being little weakling little kids who can't fight, can't walk, can't talk, can't think, because they're eating sugar all day long.
Yeah, that's something that our current SCOTUS, the so-called ruler of the United States, has really, as though it's not sad enough that that all he has seemed to do is to want to privatize all areas, but and that is for his own personal wealth. And but just the fact that the climate change information is gone. Another issue that I've been efforting lately is, and I'm not sure if they have that in Oregon, because I would think not, because you all are really progressive out there. But here in St. Louis, we actually have a Christian organization that offers sex education to children in Missouri, and they focus on abstinence. And this is a Christian-based entity that really doesn't give children any information about STDs or about birth control. They just tell them, don't do it. And that is just the most irresponsible thing that I can think of. It's like if you were to go into an Ebola field, you would certainly want to be cautioned and protected against the things that could potentially harm you, and you wouldn't accept it to say, you know what, I'll just stay away from those things. It's like, no.
Isn't it exactly what's happened in the nuclear industry? Isn't this exactly what Trumpy is doing with the EPA, going, hey, we're just not going to spill. That's all. Don't worry. We're not going to spill.
Right.
There's no problem. We're going to keep it contained. We're going to build a mountain. We're going to put it in Yucca Mountain. We're going to put it somewhere. Don't worry about it. Somebody asked me about the Yucca Mountain thing the other day, and, you know, I don't know enough about it, but I do know that it was not a great idea. There was a lot of reasons, and I tell people, look it up, get active. If you have a question about something, don't ask me. I mean, I'll give you my opinion this is, by the way, Wendy, this is my 301st show. Yesterday was show 300. Yeah.
Well,
so
congratulations.
I obviously have lots of opinions. This is more of an opinion show. I mean, I give my opinions while I call in activists to talk about what they've been doing, and we discuss our opinions. That does not mean our listeners need to take either of our word for it. Even, I don't care what kind of expert it is, even Dr. Busby, Dr. Caldecott, she does tell people, go read my book because I give you the evidence. That's why she says, go read my book. It's not about her promoting her stuff for profit. She wrote the book so people will get the information. You know what I mean? It's a backwards kind of thing. Scientists don't write books just to make money. They write books to get the information out.
I can't think of a single scientist that's ever written a book to make money. That's just not what scientists do. I applaud efforts that turn out that way, but science exists for science itself. It exists for truth, and we cannot let others' ignorance be as powerful as our facts. That can't happen. We have to stick to what we know and not to be swayed by people that say, oh, nuclear pollution, that's nothing to worry about. It's like, well, no, actually, there's a ton to worry about. And these are the reasons why I feel that way.
I think saying it's nothing to worry about is emotional candy. You swallow it, it tastes good. You can't really tell if it's good or bad for you, but it sure does taste good to swallow that. And then when it causes cancer, because eating sugar, by the way, folks, it's turning out that if you consume sugar in your diet, it sort of attracts cancer cells. So we're being bombarded with nuclear pollution, which we know causes cancer, but there's no reason to this is my other thing, Wendy, when you're talking about how this other Christian group, and I think I'm kind of circling around to this main idea here, is it's kind of a brainwashing, a gaslighting. We're all responding to people who have been gaslit, who are in high positions or in positions like those people in the church, not educating the children. They genuinely believe that where we've got wrong in this country, gone wrong, is with the women's liberation, with the men and women's liberation movement of the 60s. When women, when the birth control happened, that's why they're going after birth control. They like it when women cannot control their birth. When birth control happened, everything changed in our culture because women for the first time finally had an opportunity to build the lives and to be conscious about, do I really want to have children? How many children do I really want? Before it was my grandmother had 13 kids. My mother had 8 children. You know what I mean? It was like, it was really ridiculous. The planet, not only can in history, people had the size of families that their environment could sustain. Now we can have as many children because we're not sustaining our environment. We don't care about sustaining the environment. We're just going to use it up. And it's it's kind of the consumption of sugar. This is where I go back to this idea. We've been sold the idea that eating sugar on these high consumptions, we subsidize corn and sugar. And out of that corn, we build corn syrup for the candy industry, and our government pays for it. And why is that? Because it's part of using us as assets on a balance sheet, as my intro says. It is a very subversive thing. And the lack of knowledge about, this is, again, I'm in a disclaimer here, my opinion, all these different ideas about who's controlling, the overlords. I've often referred to them as the overlords. People call them the Illuminati. Some people think it's the industrial military complex. Some think it's the Queen. The few hundred families who have all the money. Let's just put it to you that way. The reason they have developed these systems, they basically lick their chops when they realized what they could do when the radio came around at the turn of the century. And they went for it. They hired Edward Bernays to write and develop his plan for propaganda and enacted it. And then out of that came the books that they used as operating manuals, 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Seriously, this is it's shocking.
Oh, yeah. Actually, just this week, I think, and I'm completely blanking on the name, but PBS had a mini-series, and it was about World War I, or the Great War. I had seen part of it at a PBS special that they had downtown where they just showed like an hour and a half of the 5 or 8 hours or however long it was. But the majority of the movie was about propaganda and art and how art impacted the way that people behaved during the war. And that they also depended on, they had meatless Mondays and, wheatless Wednesdays and all these different things. And the reason that they had those things was that so that neighbors could shame one another. So that way, if there was anyone that wasn't adhering to the meatless Mondays or whatever, then they would become the object of ridicule by their neighbors, and they would be peer pressured, if you will, to adhere to what everyone was doing to support the war. So there's so much propaganda going on. We're constantly being fed images and information about the way that the overlords, as you say, want us to spend our money. And education is a wonderful thing. I'm just brokenhearted about any PBS funding being lowered or taken away. That's just criminal.
Again, let's hope we can fight for that one, because can you imagine like America without Big Bird? I mean, that's how I feel. Like, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually,
I mean, our children are not going to have Big Bird because the Republicans are so callous and selfish. Actually, you want to know what? Because I'm a tax professional, this gets back to how they're going to be affecting us. And this is the big picture. Their plan is to really tighten the belt. Like, they're planning on taking away, like, your student loans. You know how you can deduct that. They're planning on taking away the child tax credit, the earned income tax credits. They're planning on, they have already modified the home mortgage loan deduction pretty dramatically for people. So it's kind of but this is all Alan Greenspan's plan. This is where you're right. Education matters. People do not understand what's happening here. This is the neoliberal idea proposed by Alan Greenspan, exactly as Newt Gingrich wanted it to happen in America when they went after Clinton. They were hoping they could do something to Clinton, demonize him, and then put in there. But people stood fast. They couldn't pass that picture for the new American century or whatever it was, that stupid little phrase they wanted us to believe. I never can even repeat it. I mean, it's an emotional block, I guess, because I can't stand their program. But basically, his idea is privatize everything, militarize the police and the military, because people are going to rebel. So you have to put rebellion down quickly, because when you take away all their, quote, free stuff, like, helping the poor people and helping the kids go to school and PBS and the arts and liberals, take that all away and privatize it all. And the idea is that the private organizations will have an interest in Oh my gosh, the phone again. The private organization will have an interest in taking care of their culture, and they will not. Uh, I mean, as we've seen, Rick
Hmm.
Perry, who was what, the governor of the state when one of the worst nuclear spills happened in Texas, now
Hmm.
is the Department of Energy after sitting on the board of that company that spilt the waste while he was
Hmm.
governor.
Hmm. Yep. But welcome to the cabinet. It's
So, are you guys in St. Louis concerned about the EPA getting seriously defunded? And I mean, is that going to impact what goes on in your area? No, because what
you
you're
know,
dealing with is not the EPA. You're dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers in Bridgeton, right?
well, I have a feeling that they're all kind of interconnected at one point, just because they're all federal agencies. But so really, it stands to reason that everything is going to kind of be taken away or reduced dramatically. And to be honest, I am not clear on what the total impact is going to be, because I'm just I, I'm still kind of in disbelief that this is even going to happen, and maybe I won't really be able to comprehend it until it comes down to something like, I have a question and I call the EPA and there's nobody that will answer my call and nobody that will call me back. So I feel a lot of trepidation. I don't feel good about it. It's certainly a scary thing, even though I don't feel that the EPA has given the Westlake landfill group the respect and attention that they deserve. They have had a new change in leadership, and the guy who was the leader previously is now in the public, or is in the private sector and is a professor at a college in Texas, no less. But so since this change of leadership has happened, I have seen more evidence of more testing, more characterization, just more caring from the EPA overall. So even though I don't think that they have necessarily always done right by the Westlake landfill, they absolutely fill a very important need, and they are really kind of our frontline protectors for air and water pollution. I really think that the impact overall is going to be that more and more people are going to be exposed to more and more particles and pollution. There's going to be more free radicals and latent effects for cancers that will happen later in life. And so that's why education is so important, so that people can learn what antioxidants are and how improving their diet can help them, staying away from sugar and processed foods like you're talking about, and trying to do the best that they can.
Yeah, and
That
being
said,
happy. But you know what? Besides that, you know what else they can do, and it really matters. We have Republican-run Senate, Republican-run House, Republican-run White House. We
mhm,
need to move them away from shutting down the EPA. You know, they passed this bill. It needs to be not passed by the Senate. We need a bill that improves the EPA. We need a bill that really literally removes corporate control and privatization out of the EPA. The government, just like the reason that the Army Corps of Engineers runs better is because they run it.
mhm.
You know what I mean?
Well, I completely do. I don't. That
This is where
issue has
even
been
our own
evident for so long.
military has gone wrong. I mean, look at Blackwater. Look at Eric Prince. I mean, colluding with the reason Eric Prince is living in Dubai, folks, is because he is in a lot of hot water with our government legally because he is a serious murderer. But
Mm,
Blackwater is still involved with our military. They're in a
mm,
tentacle, but when you look at the tentacle fingers of who they're related to, just like Betsy DeVos is Blackwater's sister.
right.
I mean,
Oh,
she wants to literally they want to gut the Congress passed a bill. The Senate, I mean, I beg your pardon, not the Senate, but the House has passed a bill that will close the Department of Education on December 31st, 2018.
right.
Along with the EPA, the same date, by the way, 2018.
Mm. Well,
So,
I hope some people come to their senses before then. And especially the deal with education, because it's already
yeah.
been shown that charter schools don't perform better than regular public schools because of any innovations that they've made or any new trends that they have. What we need to do is improve the education of all of America, not just the people that are able to secure vouchers and it's just the way that the privatization issues are being run by this administration is just it's just business people really don't have a place in government, because businesses MO is to make money, and government's MO is to provide opportunity and protection. So there's really not I'm really disheartened to understand that the person who's, supposedly running the country really only has one objective, and that is money. That's why he's interested in China. That's why he's interested in Russia, because he wants to be sure that he gets in on the as a middleman somewhere in the offering of products to mass population. That's what he wants.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, I don't think he did much to impress China. China came here to visit and went home, and now they put 150,000 men on their border of North Korea. They put their country on high alert in China. They're on high alert right now.
Wow.
So did
Trump
actually make the Chinese leader feel emboldened or nervous? But something happened. Something is not right. And so, but you know what? This is the deal here in terms of how we can live our lives. I still believe that we need to pressure our Congress. We need to call the White House. We need to work for peace and envision peace instead of they want us to live in so much fear. We're envisioning the anxiety that we don't want. In order for us to really, we're at a quantum level, none of us are separate. And we know this scientifically. Our thoughts are things. If we commune together at a scientific level, at a really deep, higher level, if we can actually manifest, we can change how things go. And we have seen this happen. They've had prayer-ins where they stopped nuclear weapons from being tested in the 60s. We need to envision them changing their minds and saving our planet instead of destroying it. That's why I'm on the radio, Wendy.
well, people are coming around. Actually, tomorrow I'm kind of excited about it because I'm meeting some friends for a tax day march where we're all basically going to get together and we have signs, and it's basically going to hopefully get some media attention, and it's about President Trump needing to release his tax records. This is, there's no way to know if he has divested, which, let's face it, he hasn't. He has no concern about ethics whatsoever. But, it is a requirement by law that he is not supposed to be receiving any personal money and from any of the political actions that he has. And the only way to know that is if he releases his taxes. How are we supposed to know if he's invested in something if he hasn't been transparent about it? So at any rate, we have the Tax Day March this weekend. We have the Earth Day March next weekend, which, at least here in St. Louis, is also going to be a science march, a march for science. I'm really excited about being involved in that one.
I think a lot of people are going to I think people are going to come to the streets again for that one.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. We're actually the organizers of the St. Louis March for Earth Day are patterning it after the D.C. March. And so they really have, a lot of people that are committed to doing this and all over the country. So I
hope we have millions of people, because that would show them that we really want real science. I made up a protest sign that says free scientists from corporations. Some guy started art. I got flipped off for that sign, to be honest. People drove past me and flipped me off. I must be hitting the right nerve then. That's good.
Some people don't understand that the efforts that other people make are actually for the good of everyone, including them, even the people that are ungrateful. So
even if you disagree. See, but then, Wendy, this gets back to the whole thing about integrity, conscience. If we just get back to, frankly, I think in my view, Fukushima changed everything. They've moved children back in the Fukushima prefecture 7 miles away from the plant. That is off the charts, a radioactive contaminated zone still.
Right.
And
the fact that the Olympics are going to be there, my mind spins regularly with the information that it receives because I don't know how to process
not
it
only
all.
is the Olympics going to be there, they're going to have surfing for the first time at the Olympics. Off the shore, the East Coast. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And it's not going to be at the Fukushima prefecture, but everything is below the Fukushima prefecture.
Right.
So it's that upstream downstream problem that they're going to. And they also designed. Libby Halevi reported this. Toshiba did a thing for the community and reclaimed the wood and is building a facility for the Olympics in Fukushima for the opening ceremonies.
Wow. You know,
come sit on a radioactive seat. Come put your bum on this one.
Yeah, really. I don't even know what to say.
That is outrageous.
Well, I mean, I know that the Olympic Committee does choose the cities, you know, ahead of time, years ahead of time. So I'm not sure if Fukushima had happened yet before Tokyo was named the Olympic site. So.
Well, that was the pressure of the IAEA normalizing radiation. That was the kicker. When that happened and they realized they have no answers, they have stopped sending robots in. They spent $32 million on their last robot and it lasted like 20 minutes.
Right. They're all fine.
And it melted. Yeah. So it came out like goo.
Wow. Yeah, there is, I don't know what they're going to do. It's really, you know, it's frightening. It's, when you think of the entire.
Well, actually, we do know what they're going to do. They are going to do nothing and let it poison the world. Like they have not called all the governments together and said, "Hey, we need your brightest, best scientists to come, you know, to figure it out. We need to stop all the bickering and get down to this thing is going to." We can look at our oceans right here on the West Coast. There's such grotesque denial. They're calling it it's because of climate change that the salmon have disappeared. But frankly, the salmon have fallen off the charts because of Hanford and Fukushima. They were in bad shape because of Hanford. The Soho have been going up and down in population since the 90s, and honestly, mostly down. And there has never been a word about nuclear pollution. Never. Not one scientific study. They do not test them in fact, when the seals were dropping off like flies in Southern California, I saw a news conference with about 13 scientists and they had studied them. They couldn't figure out what is going on with these seals. Why are they dropping off like this? I mean, thousands of times higher, losing lots and lots of seals. An audience member asked, well, have you tested them for any radiation from Fukushima? They said, no, we specifically did not test for radiation. Because we didn't want to, because if we find it, then we have to figure out where did it come from, because they've been testing for so long, that creates another whole thing. So they specifically did not test for it. Now, that's because the IAEA runs the world with an iron fist. Since they got invented and acknowledged by the UN, they have run the nuclear industry. There's a great organization, I don't know if you've gone to their webpage, called the independentwho.org. And they are all the doctors who used to work at the World Health Organization who got sick of the IAEA censoring their work. So they stand in front of the UN in Europe, 7-day-a-week vigil, asking for the IAEA and the WHO to renegotiate their contracts so the WHO is independent of the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Wow. Well, it's certainly not the first time that I've heard science being censored. I'm just sorry to hear about it.
This is why, Wendy, your city has been allowed to be so sick. This is why, because they control the studies. I read a scientific study on my YouTube channel about the safety culture at the nuclear power facilities. It was a brand new scientific study in a published journal, 2013, that I ran across doing science study for school. The safety culture at the IAEA had never been tested. And when this organization found it, they implemented a test. When these scientists found it, the test, they had 8 bars to cross. They had a safety culture of 8 bars. They only passed one, and only at 50%.
Hmm.
So we wonder why we're having serious problems everywhere, because their safety culture model is the model used worldwide at every nuclear facility.
Hmm. I can only hope that people will come to their good senses with the understanding and listening to scientists about the harm of it. When I think of Trump using the phrase "the war on coal," I almost choke every time I hear it.
Me
There
too.
is a war on coal. He's sort of setting the table for allowing the nuclear industry to be able to take over again by taking the money away from wind energy and solar energy, R&D.
Ding,
So
ding, 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 ding.
yep. It's all I can say is every day that I'm alive and my voice is still working is another day that I'm going to be making phone calls to my electeds, and another day that I'm going to be reading about the things that are harming our environment and putting people at risk and trying to do the right thing. It's not always easy to know what that is, but education is always the answer. So
Exactly. And I would say this. We're not trying to do the right thing. We are doing the right thing. We're doing what we think we can do. We're doing what we know we can do. We're not ignoring ideas and going, oh, well, I'm just not going to speak up because I don't matter. The right thing is following your conscience, because all of us, what's happened is we have a culture of elected officials and people who are in control of power, who are being controlled by money, not their inner gut, not they're ignoring their humanity.
Mm-hmm. You're cutting out on me, Lonnie, so I'm glad it's at the end of our interview instead of the beginning.
Me too. We've got about 3 minutes left. Me too. We are cutting out. Wendy, I really appreciate you being here, and I can't tell you how much I think about the citizens of St. Louis and the suffering that you're going through. But I want to thank you for bringing light to this and being willing to speak out in such a frank manner that you do. It is refreshing and very necessary.
Well, thank you. I agree. I don't think enough people attend. And when you were talking about how, there was only a few people involved in issues, sometimes when I go to meetings and there's only a handful of people, it can be really, discouraging. But we can't be discouraged. We need to lift each other up. We need to help each other and understand and try to put that feeling of caring first before accusations or ill feelings or anything like that. We really need to build each other up, help each other out, and try to be the best neighbors and earth managers that we can be. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you like this. I always enjoy talking to you, Lonnie.
Well, and I'm glad you show us how to put up with the scorn, because I know that when you go to meetings, there's always people on two sides of a fence. Somehow there's always people with egos, like they think they're better activists. They think they're this, they think they're that. That's part of the activism community, being excluded from organizations that say they're in the know. Like if you were to go to an organization, say with 350.org, and you wanted to talk to Bill McGibbons, pretty much they'll look at you, but they won't. They are not going to open up to the idea that maybe nuclear is really harmful. Or activists that have their own organizations who don't have time because they're super busy and they can't talk to you because they've got reports to do. You know what I mean? This is why I love this show, because people are willing to come here and share their information, and we give them venue. So I hope you'll come back in a month or two and share what you can and share your ideas and help make America better again. How about that?
Well, thank you again, and thanks a lot for allowing me these opportunities. I always enjoy our talks, and I know that you're somebody out there doing the right thing, and that makes me feel a whole lot better. So
thanks, Wendy. You guys put your courage feet on. Take some action. It does matter. Talk to you guys tomorrow.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.